How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to the top 5 all-wheel drive cars that you can buy for less than £8,000. All-wheel drive cars are generally my favourites, and that's even despite the slight additional understeer you get over rear-wheel drive cars and the fact they're maybe not quite as good for drifting unless you're going for sort of really quick drifting. But yes, I really like all-wheel drive cars, especially because you can flex on other people when it's bad conditions like snow or mud or whatever. So I thought I'd run with you 5 all-wheel drive cars that are particularly interesting and worthy of talking about in a video. In order to reduce bias on my side, I've ordered them from least to most quick and then broken any ties via brake horsepower figures. Remember as always that whenever you're buying any second-hand car, maintenance, repairs, insurance and all that good stuff is really important to remember. And on top of that, don't forget to make videos from the UK market perspective so prices in other countries may differ. I said that really quickly, but hopefully you got it. As always, remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. Without further ado, let's get into the video. Before we get into the top 5, I wanted to mention a car that doesn't quite make it into this list due to its 0 to 60 time being slower than the rest, but a worthy all-wheel drive car nonetheless with a big fan base. That is the Mark V Volkswagen Golf R32, which hosts a 3.2 litre VR6 engine, putting out 246 brake horsepower and managing 0 to 60 in around 6.3 seconds. Now, I've spoken at length about the R32 in other videos, so instead let me run through its all-wheel drive system, which is actually only part-time, as the Haldex that runs the drivetrain normally provides power to just one axle and gives power to the other two in cases where it notices the car is slipping. For this reason, if you want all-wheel drive all the time, a Haldex controller is usually the best route to go, as the most advanced ones will allow you to decide when you want power to go to all 4 wheels and how much power, particularly useful for spirited driving. You can pick up one of these R32s for as little as £4,500 with high mileage, but for £8,000 you'll be getting one in good condition with around 60 to 80,000 miles on the clock. In terms of reliability, a lot of owners on forums suggest they've had little to no issues with the car, but some key points to note that could potentially go wrong include clunking from the front strut mounts, flex pipe leakage and general electrical issues like the door locks, which seems to be a common issue amongst VW vehicles. As I said, not too in depth on this car as it's a bonus, but well worth a mention regardless. Check out my previous video on tuner cars in order to see how you can make this into a total beast. So on to the top 5 now, and starting us off we have the first generation Volvo S60 R, which hosts a turbocharged 2.5 litre engine, putting out 296 brake horsepower or 300 PS as people often mistake that figure for brake horsepower, and does 0 to 60 in 5.5 seconds. Stunning performance from this Swedish 4-door saloon. Its all-wheel drive system, like the R32, comes from Haldex, but some key features to note are the large Brembo brakes for some insane stopping power, 18-inch alloys and an intelligent suspension system called 4C, built in collaboration with Öhlins, which can be set to different driving modes. Not bad for a car that was released in the year 2000. The maddest fact that I could find relates to the little boot lid spoiler, only included on the R, which apparently increases the downforce of the car by 20% over the standard S60, which is pretty mad. You can pick up one of these for around £3,500 minimum and you'll get a very high mileage pre-facelift model, or for £8,000 you'll get a very low mileage example post-facelift, as the most expensive ones I could find were around £7,000. However, even though it's a Volvo, reliability is not considered its strong point. Common problems include the timing belt, PCV and the 4C struts, and on forums owners note too many issues to even list here. With this in mind, you should either be willing and able to work on the car yourself or have the spare cash in mind to get someone else to sort it for you. So maybe not a positive on reliability, but still a strong contender for a cheap, all-wheel drive fun car. Coming in at number 4 we have a fan favourite and one of my own personal favourite cars, the Mitsubishi Lancer Evo 4, which hosts a 2 litre inline-4 turbocharged engine, and that twin-scroll turbocharger helps to put out 276 brake horsepower and do 0 to 60 in 5.4 seconds. Let's get right into why I chose the 4 as opposed to all the other Evo options, simply because it's the cheapest available at the time of making this video, at around £7,000 for a model with around 90,000 miles on the clock. When the 4th generation Evo was released in 1996, the platform was completely changed, with the whole engine and transaxle shifted 180 degrees to reduce torque steer and make the weight more balanced. The way to spot an Evo 4 is by looking at the 2 large rally style headlights on the front bumper. The 4 came in 2 versions, the RS and the GSR. The rally lights only came as standard on the GSR and they were an option on the RS. But the RS did have an LSD on the front and an LSD on the rear, while the GSR had the active yaw control instead, which basically uses the steering, throttle and G sensors to control the torque provided to each wheel. Tommy Mäkinen, a 4-time World World Rally Championship winner, drove the Evo 4 to his second world title in 1997, beating Colin McRae by just 1 point. Mäkinen was absolutely one of my personal childhood heroes, which is why this car is particularly special to me. When it comes to the road car, however, reliability is mixed, as some owners note having no issues at all, while others note horrendous issues like the dreaded crank of death, as well as the diff and piston rings. Basically, the best quote I could find is that Evo 4s are solid except for the engines, so maybe keep that in mind. Either way, a rally legend and a car with an incredibly large following, so well worth its place on this list. On to the top 3 now, and in third we have the Audi TTS, based on the Mark II TT, which hosts a 2-litre TFSI inline-4 engine, putting out 268 brake horsepower and managing 0 to 60 in 5.2 seconds. When released, it was offered as either a 6-speed manual or a 6-speed S-tronic, although in the US only the latter was made available. In my opinion, the Mark II TTS has a weird middle child syndrome between the standard TT and the TTRS, as you can get quite decently kitted out versions of the former, and the latter is just that much better than it. But that's not to say that the TTS is a bad car, as it comes with Audi magnetic ride, lowered sportier springs, quad exit exhausts, and the wider and more aggressive body kit, helping the car to stand out at least a little from the other TTs. One cool feature is the lap timer on the centre of the instrument cluster, which will help you get your PB to and from the shops or whatever. The minimum you'll pay for a TTS is around £7,000, and for that you'll get anywhere between 90 to 120,000 miles. Towards the 8k mark, you can just about expect a model with a full service history, which makes life a little bit easier. When it comes to reliability, there are a few quality issues, like sagging leather seats, noisy window regulators, knocking steering racks, excessive oil consumption, and poor connectors to lights. Something that would really put me off getting the DSG is the mechatronics issues, which would push me towards going for a manual for sure. As an overall though, no issues that look to end the car completely. This is, in my opinion, a sure classic in the future, especially as it's the second highest option in the line. For that reason, I definitely feel like it deserves a spot on this list. Just missing out on the top spot, we have another of my all-time favourite cars, the Subaru Impreza WRX STI, which hosts a turbocharged 2.5 litre Boxer 4 engine, putting out 276 brake horsepower and doing 0 to 60 in 5.2 seconds. You could also get an STI with a 2 litre twin-scroll turbocharged engine, just for reference, and this is worth keeping in mind for later in this section. So this Impreza was available following the first facelift, also known as the Blob Eye, and continued to be available for the Hawkeye second facelift. The STI division of the company has little to do with the issues that plague those who have too much you know, but instead stands for this, and was ultimately created to handle all the performance and motorsports activities for the company. This means that the STI has a lot of sophisticated tech that the WRX didn't get, like the LSD, a driver controlled center diff, stiffer chassis and suspension, bigger brakes, and all that good stuff to ultimately make it a better car on track. And leading on from that point, it would be impossible to discuss the Impreza without mentioning its rally pedigree. The Impreza you see before you took drivers' championships in 2001 with Richard Burns and Robert Reed, and in 2003 with Petter Solberg and Phil Mills. Even the great Tommy Mäkinen drove this Impreza in the World Rally Championship towards the end of his career. But the person that immediately comes to mind when I think of Imprezas is the late, great Colin McRae, who won the title in 1995 in an older model, but is synonymous with the car regardless and helped cement its legendary status in my opinion. £8,000 will get you a Scooby from around 2006 with between 80 to 100,000 miles on the clock, and there are plenty more available at this price point than the Evo mentioned previously, which is nice to hear. Services are required once every 7,500 miles, and even though there isn't the greatest history of reliability for the brand, I actually couldn't find many people complaining about the STI being unreliable, or at least when it comes to the 2 litre model. With the 2.5 litre engine, it's a completely different story, as head gasket failure isn't uncommon. One thing that is difficult for all STIs is the fact that many of these cars have been tuned, which means finding a stock one with less risk is more difficult. I know there's sometimes beef between Impreza and Evo people, but honestly, I'm just grateful both exist, and both just about fit into this video. If you asked me to choose which one had more of an impact on me personally, I'd struggle given my love for rallying, but it was the Impreza that I actually saw rallying in person, so it's probably what I'd go for. Taking the top spot, we have two cars, both from Audi, the 3rd generation S6 and the 3rd generation S4, with the former carrying them to the top spot with its 5.1 second 0 to 60 time and 428 brake horsepower figure, resulting from its even firing 5.2 litre V10 FSI engine, which is heavily related to that you'd find in a Lamborghini Gallardo, and the Audi S8. The S4 on the other hand does 0 to 60 in 5.4 seconds, has 339 brake horsepower at its disposal, and hosts a 4.2 litre V8. The C6 S6 has been discussed in many of my previous videos, but it remains one of the best cars for the money. Looking at its all-wheel drive system, it has a Torsen-based Quattro permanent 4-wheel drive setup, as well as having electronic diff lock and traction control as part of its electronic stability program. Simply put, this car has some serious tech in it to keep it driving and handling well, especially for a car of its size. The S4 also had a permanent 4-wheel drive Torsen setup, but the key difference between the two cars is the fact that the S6 came exclusively in automatic, while the S4 came with a 6-speed manual as standard, and received Tiptronic auto transmission in 2003. Interestingly, despite the S4 being quoted at 5.4 seconds for 0 to 60, a number of third-party tests actually found it to hit 60 in less than 5 seconds, and if that's the case, that's some serious performance from what is ultimately a sportified family saloon. I appreciate I've focused quite heavily on the technical parts of these cars, but long-term viewers will know I've discussed them at length in previous videos. Click the iCard for one of those videos. For £8,000 you'll get an S4 with around 70 to 100,000 miles on the clock, or an S6 with 100k but full service history. You can pick up either of these for as little as £5,000, but you may want to have a listen to the reliability points before you make your decision. The S6 is generally considered to be very reliable, with very few mechanical issues. The main problem you'll have is the maintenance and running costs, as things like tyres and oil changes cost a lot more than the average car. On the other hand, the S4 suffers from the dreaded chain tensioner issue, which is quite an expensive and engine out job. That's pretty much the flagship issue with this car, but there are other problems like coolant leaks, compressor issues, slow starter issues, and problems with the multi-link suspension. I would probably take the S6 out of these two cars and try to daily drive it, realise it cost me more to commute in than I was actually making it work every day, and promptly stop daily driving it. Either way, both of these all-wheel drive beasts are sick cars and very much deserve the top spot. So in this video I've run you through 5 cheap all-wheel drive cars that you can buy for less than £8,000. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you agreed with some or all of my picks. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Massive thank you as always to all my patrons. I'm super glad to be getting rid of this moustache as well in a couple of days. That's going to be great. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, but as always thank you very much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.